Is that if you owe me Nazir Daf Hamad Zion, Nazir 37, and today we are in the middle of a sugya, which is one of the most powerful, beautiful sugyas in the Shas. And so we had started back on Lamed Hayam Abayz at the bottom, where Rabbi Avo had said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan that we say this concept called Heter Mitztaref L'Iser, one of the most fundamental concepts as relates to kashrut, that we say that he says that the whole Torah, we say this concept of Heter Mitztaref L'Iser. We don't say it in the whole Torah, we only say it by Nazir. That's what Rabbi Avo said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. That if you have a Heter, if you have something that's permitted, like bread, and you have wine, which is prohibited to the Nazir, you combine it to say the whole thing, it reaches the amount of a revius or a kazayas, to say that it's prohibited to eat. And that is learned out from the word mishras by the anavim, by the fact that the Nazir cannot eat mishras anavim, grapes that are soaked in bread. Abaye challenge, and Rabbi Dimi repeats this teaching of Rabbi Avo in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Abaye challenges this, and he says, why? It's Heter Mitztaref L'Iser, it's by the whole Torah. I mean, he brings down other cases, and Rabbi Dimi responds and says, no, in those cases, we're saying that the problem is not that they're both eating it at the same time, the Heter with the Iser, but it's being eaten over an amount of time, over a period of time, which is called Kedei Achilas process time. It takes to eat a loaf of bread. And we're going to say that's biblically speaking the problem. Let's say it's over 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 9 minutes, whatever it is. And therefore, for that reason, that's why it's prohibited, because Kedei Achilas process is biblical. And so Abaye continues to challenge Rav Dimi, and Rav Dimi deflects the challenges. So now in today's Daf Yomi, Abaye 5 lines from the top says, whoa, let's just say maybe let's go in 180 degree. Abaye says, Abaye had previously been trying to argue that this concept of mishras teaches us Heter Mitztaref L'Iser, not just by Nazir, but by all prohibitions of the Torah. He says, wait, how do we know it even teaches us that even by Nazir it doesn't teach us it? So maybe it's time to teach us this concept, fundamental concept as relates to kashrus of tam ki ikar. That even though the main prohibition is not there anymore, but just the taste, the remnants is left. You remove the prohibition, but it gave the taste. How do we know that that's still prohibited? Maybe that's what it's teaching us. Maybe that's mishras is coming to teach us this principle of tam ki ikar. So the Gemara says, well, before we address Abaye's point and say whether or not mishras is teaching us tam ki ikar, the Gemara says, well, originally Abaye made kara kakashalei my dekamer of Dimi. At first, Abaye was bothered by what Rav Dimi said. He didn't even want to say Heter Mitztaref L'Iser by Nazir. He wanted to say by the whole Torah. And now, the kamosiv wa kol halantiyut. He asked him all these questions. And Hadar Amarei Litin Tam Ki Ikar. And now he's going in 180 degrees in the opposite direction. He's going 180 degrees and saying, not only is it not teaching us Heter Mitztaref L'Iser, it's teaching us Tam Ki Ikar. It's not even teaching it to us by Nazir. So Abaye has completely reversed himself. So the Gemara says, well, no, Basar Deshani way, Amar way, Delmoitain Tam Ki Ikar Huda Asa. And so, what Abaye is doing is after Abaye had received all these responses to his questions, he says, you know what, maybe it's not to teach us Heter Mitztaref L'Iser. Maybe it's to teach us Tam Ki Ikar. Some say that this piece of the Gemara, some of the Rishonim say that this piece of the Gemara was taught not by the Amorayim, but by the Savorayim, by the period of sages who came immediately after the close of the Gemara. Because the Lashon Nazir is Meshuna, the language of Nazir is different. And also this next word, look at the Tanya, some say that this is not a brisa, but Abaye is explaining his position. Because he says, Mishras Litain Tam Ki Ikar. Why would we say that the word Mishras in that verse is to teach us this concept of Tam Ki Ikar? That to teach us the concept that taste is like the essence is still there. Let's say for some reason you soak the grapes in the water. And now these grapes have the taste of the wine. Chayiv, you're going to be liable if the water just has a taste of the wine, even though the wine is not there anymore, the grapes are not there anymore. So that's what Abai is saying. Maybe that's what this Mishras Anavim is teaching us. If you just soak the grapes in the water and then you remove it, you're liable. And Mikana Tadan Kol Yisur and Shabbat Torah. And from here we can learn out to all the prohibitions of the Torah, this concept of Tam Kikar, this fundamental concept by Kashrus. Ma Nazir Shein Isuro Isuroim, just like a Nazirite whose prohibition is not forever, Vein Isuro Isur Hana. So the Nazirite has certain leniencies. One, it's only for the period of time of the Nazirus. Number two, you're allowed to get benefit from it. It's not asur ba'ana. And number three, be'yesh heter l'isuro, you could go to a chacham and the chacham can annul your vow. You're allowed to be matir your prohibition. And nevertheless, by a nazir, we say yasabo tam ki'ikar. We're going to say this concept called tam ki'ikar, kuaya kerem. Let's go to kuaya kerem. The prohibition of planting seeds in the grapevine, near a grapevine, she'isuran isuroam, that this prohibition is forever. Prohibition doesn't go away. The isuran isurana, and while it's growing, you know how to have any benefit from it. You know how to have any benefit from the koya keren. The ein heter isuran, and you can't go to a chacham and annul it. Eino din sheyasabo tam ki'ikar. For sure, tam ki'ikar should apply by koya keren. And so too says Abaye, v'uadin wa'arla b'shtayim. And it's the same case with arla in respect to two of these stringencies. Which two stringencies? So the Mefarish here says she'isuro isurana, that arla is prohibited to have benefit from, and also you can't go to the ein heter isuro. And also, you can't go to the chacham to annul your vow. But don't say it's prohibited forever, because after 3 years, it becomes permitted. But this is a complicated mefarish, because the arla itself, the fruit itself, is prohibited for 3 years. But in the 4th year, the arla fruit doesn't become permitted. It's the next year. It goes to netar ravai. So therefore, the Toso says, rejects the mefarish. He says, I don't understand. He says that certainly it is prohibited forever, the fruit from the first 3 years. So what it means is that it refers to the 4th year, because in the 4th year you could eat the fruit. It's called netar ravai. You eat it in Jerusalem, or you could redeem it and bring the money to Jerusalem. So therefore, the peiros can be redeemed, just like you do it by Ma'aser Sheni. And then Tosfos gives a second answer from Rabbi Yom Tov ben Arav Rabbi Yehuda. Yom Tov, the son of Rabbi Yehuda, who explains that what does it mean when it says by Arla Yesh Heter Isur, that you're allowed to cause something that was prohibited to become permitted, like to plant a tree, even though it will be Arla. And you can't do that by Kuaya Kerem. And so too, a person is allowed to take a vow to become a Nazir. Anyway, back to the Talmud. So Abaye is saying that we're going to learn out Tam Ki'ikar from Nazir to the rest of the Shas. So and it proves it because Nazir is stricter than Koya Kerem and Arla. So the Gemara says, Amru Ahumi Rabbanan. So there was one of the Rabbanan who was there, and they respond to Abaye. And it says, no, Rabbi Avo is not saying Tam Ki'ikar here. He's saying Heter Mitzdaref Isur by Nazir, because Kika Amro Rabbi Akiva. When Rabbi Avo says Heter Mitzdaref Isur, he's really saying he's following an opinion of one of the Tanaim. Hi, Rabbi Akiva. Which Rabbi Akiva? Elim Rabbi Akiva Dahacha. So the Gemara says, where does Rabbi Akiva say Heter is Mitzdaref Isur only by Nazir? He learns this out from if you want to say it's Rabbi Akiva, from here, which is a Mishnah and Psacha and Mem Dalet, which is, by the way, the other main sugya of Tam Ki'ikar. That it says, Rabbi Akiva says, Afilu Shara Pito B'Yayim V'Yeshbo Kedei Tzaraf Kazayas Chayev. There, Rabbi Akiva said, if you want to say, if you want to say it's Rabbi Akiva from here, from our Mishnah over here, where Rabbi Akiva says, even if you soak the bread in wine and you have enough to combine it from outside the amount, you're going to be liable. So there we see Rabbi Akiva says, Heter mitzvah for Isur. So you want to say that Rabbi Avo is saying his position like Rabbi Akiva. That's not necessarily the case from our Mishnah here. You can't necessarily say that Rabbi Akiva is saying Heter mitzvah for Isur. Dilma, hu deika kazayis be'ene. Maybe in that case, there was a kazayis of the grapes. There was actually a kazayis of the grapes. Maybe that's why Rabbi Akiva is saying there that it's prohibited. And if you say, well, what's Rabbi Akiva even telling us then? Well, what's the chiddush if there's a kazayis of the grapes in that loaf of bread? Maybe Rabbi Akiva is just arguing with the Tanakama who says, the Tanakama says you need to do a revius, and Rabbi Akiva is saying that you need to do a kazayis. Maybe that's all he's saying. And even though it's in a loaf of bread, it's still going to be prohibited with just a kazayis. So maybe it has nothing to do with that. Mitzvah for Isur. Elo Rabbi Akiva de Brisa. So no, it's the Rabbi Akiva of a Brisa. Titanya Rabbi Akiva Omer Nazir Shashar Pito B'Yayim V'Achal Kazayis B'Pasam B'Yayim Chayav. Rabbi Akiva says explicitly, if you're a Nazirite who soaked the bread in the wine and you ate an outsized amount of the bread and the wine, you're going to be liable. So it's Rabbi Akiva of the Brisa, where he says explicitly, Eter Mitzvah for Isur, that if you take some bread and you soak it in the wine, and then you eat an outsized amount of the bread and the wine, you're going to be liable. So we see from here, Rabbi Avo is ruling like Rabbi Akiva, who says, Heter mitzvah for Easter, but just by Nazir. Well, from that price, it doesn't say explicitly it's just by Nazir. But that seems to be how the Gemara understands what Rabbi Avo is saying in Rabbi Akiva. So so according to Rabbi Akiva, according to Rabbi Akiva, anyway, uses that pasuk of Mishras to teach us this idea that heter is mitzvah for Isur. So how does Rabbi Akiva know this basic fundamental principle of Vitain Tam Ki'ikar? Gemara assumes that Rabbi Akiva does hold that there's Tam Ki'ikar. So what's the source for it? So the Gemara says, so he says, he must learn that from Basar V'Chalav, from the fact that if you drop some milk in the meat, and then you remove the milk, or if you drop a piece of meat in the milk, and you remove the meat, so then you have the taste of the meat, it's just taste, and it would still be prohibited. So therefore, throughout all of the halacha, we're going to say Tam Ki'ikar. But the Rabbanan don't want to learn it out from Basar V'Chalav. Why don't the Rabbanan want to learn out from meat and milk? Because that's an unusual situation. Meat and milk, even though that's kind of the essence of the paradigm case of Tam Ki'ikar, nevertheless, we're going to say the Rabbanan say you can't learn out Tam Ki'ikar from meat and milk to the rest of Shas, because meat and milk is a chiddush. It's unusual halacha. What is the chiddush of meat and milk? Do you understand? Maybe the chiddush is that meat is permitted on its own and milk is permitted on its own, but when you combine them, it's prohibited. It can't be. It can't be that that's the chiddush, because the klayim are also permitted on their own, and only when you combine them are they prohibited. So what's the chiddush by meat and milk? That if you take the milk and you soak it in the meat all day, or you soak the meat all day in the milk, that's going to be permitted. But if you cook it in each other, that's going to be prohibited. So that's the chiddush of meat and milk. And so therefore, Rabbi Akiva says we can't learn out Tam Ki'ikar from meat and milk. We have to learn it out from Nazir. Rabbi Akiva Nami. So that's why the Rabbanan don't learn out the chiddush of Tam Ki'ikar from meat and milk. They have to learn it out from Nazir. So, but Rabbi Akiva must be learning it out from Basar V'Chalav. So, how can he learn out from Basar V'Chalav? Chiddush. How can Rabbi Akiva learn out the principle of Tam Ki'ikar from Basar V'Chalav? It's a chiddush. Ella must be on the top of 37b. Ella Yalaf Mikiyule Ovdei Kochavim. Rabbi Akiva learns it out from the pots of the idolaters, that if you get a pot from an idolater, you have to kasher the pot before you can use it. The Amar Achmana called Davar Asher Yavo Ba'esh. The Torah tells us anything which comes in fire, which you got from the Midianites, you have to bring it to the fire and kasher it. The Torah is teaching us that the pots of the idolaters are prohibited. Now, these pots who aren't these pots simply taste, and still we're saying it's prohibited. So Achanami, so too throughout the rest of the Shas, we're going to say, says Rabbi Akiva, Tam Ki'ikar. Achanami Lishna, that we're going to say that the rest of the halacha is not different from the pots of the idolaters, and we'll say Tam Ki'ikar. So the Gemara says, well, the Rabbanan who learn out from Nazir, or Rabbanan Nami Tepikoi Megilei of the Kavim. Why did the Rabbanan learn out from Nazir? Why don't they learn out this principle of Tam Ki'ikar from the idolaters? Amalei Hasam Chidashu. So the Rabbanan say no. Gilei of the Kavim, the pots of the idolaters, is also Chidish. Why? Because the Rabbi say throughout the rest of the Torah, we'll say that if it gives off a taste, and it's the taste is pagam, no same time with gam, if the taste it gives off is bad, but the rest of the Shas are going to say it's permitted. But by the parts of the idolaters, we're going to say it's prohibited. So therefore, the whole Torah we say no same time with gam is mutter. By the parts of the idolaters, we say it's prohibited. So therefore, since by the pot, since it's a chiddush, it's only Giyuv of Tuchon that we see no same time of Gam is also that we're concerned about the pots. And it's ironic that the whole concern about non-kosher pots is only by the idolaters, because the rest of the Torah we say no same time of Gam is mutter. And so therefore, you can't learn out anything from Giyuv of the Kochavim. So the Gemara says, well, according to Rabbi Akiva, Nami Achidushu. According to Rabbi Akiva, well, the Giyuv of the pots of the idolaters is also a chiddush. So therefore, how can we learn out Tam Ki'ikar from the pots of the idolaters? The Gemara says, Amar Avuna Barachia lo aser Torah el kedera bas yoma delav nosim tam of gamu. So Rav Huna Barachia says that when the Torah prohibits the pots of the idolaters, it's only prohibiting those. It's not prohibiting those pots that are of the same day, because it's not nosim tam of gamhu, and so therefore, those pots of the idolaters that are prohibited are only those pots that were cooked with that day, and it's not nosim tam of gam, so it's not a chiddush. So we're learning out this principle of tam ki'ikar from the idolaters, and because it's not really nosim tam of gam, it's not a chiddush then. And the Rabbanan say no, it's still a chiddush, because kedera bas yomi nami yevshet lo pagama porta. So the pot from that day, it's still a little bit pagam, it's still a little bit giving off a bad taste. So what we've seen so far is, let's just summarize so we don't lose track, that Rabbi Akiva said, Rabbi Avo says, Heter Mitzvah for Isur is by Nazir only. Then from the word Mishras. Abai says, no, the word Mishras maybe is teaching us Tam Ki'ikar, not Heter Mitzvah for Isur, just by Nazir. Comes along the Gemara and says this is actually Machokas Tanaim. Now Rabbi Akiva says that the word Mishras is to teach us Heter Mitzvah for Isur by Nazir, and the Rabbanan say no, the word Mishras is to teach us Tam Ki'ikar. So according to the Rabbana, according to Rabbi Akiva, how do we know Tam Ki'ikar? He learns it out. He can't learn it out from Basar B'chalav, so he learns it out from the Giyui of the Kochavim, which the rabbis don't want to say, because they say both Basar B'chalav and Giyui of the Kochavim are chiddush. So Amalei Rav Acha B'rei Rav Avia Rav Ashi. So Rav Acha, the son of Rav Avia, says to Rav Ashi, Midrabbanan Nishma Rabbi Akiva, from the Rabbanan's position that they say Tam Ki'ikar in the whole Torah from Mishras, we can also learn out the Rabbanan's position. We can also learn out Rabbi Akiva's position. From the fact that the Rabbanan say that from Mishras we learn out Tam Ki'ikar, and this is actually all the prohibitions in the Torah. Rabbi Akiva Nami, the Kamukim Le'Laim Mishras Laheter Mitzvah for Iser, Le'ima Mikana Tadam Kol Yisur and Shabbat Torah. So this is a question on Rabbi Avo, because Rabbi Avo wanted to say that Rabbi Akiva is saying heter mitzdaref for Easter only by Nazir, but if the Rabbanan are arguing with Rabbi Akiva and the Rabbanan say Tam Kikar throughout the whole Torah, so Rabbi Avo should say that Rabbi Akiva is saying heter mitzdaref for Easter throughout the whole Torah. Why is Rabbi Avo arguing that Rabbi Akiva just limits it to just this case of Nazir? So Amarle, so Rav Ashi responds to Rav Acha, Breder Rav Avia, so this is the final generation of the Shas. He says, no, he says, Amarle, Mishum, no, Rabbi Avo would say, Rabbi Akiva won't learn out from Nazir, from Mishras to Heter Mitzdaref for Easter through the whole Shas. Why? Because Nazir and Chatas are Shnei Ksuvin Abanka Echa. Because there's actually another place where we say Heter Mitzdaref for Easter, and that is by a carbon chatas, by a sin offering. And so when you have two psukim that teach us one halacha, two psukim that teach us the same halacha, then we don't say it goes throughout the whole Shas. Because from the very fact that Torah says something twice, it means it doesn't go to every other case. It's just those two cases. Anytime you have two psukim that teach us the same halacha or the same principle, even though in different areas, we can't learn out from it to the rest of Shas. Nazir Adam, Ramun out heter mitzdaref for Easter says, Rav Ashi, Rabbi Avo would learn out from the word Mishras, and Chatas Mahi, where do we know that heter mitzdaref for Easter also applies by a sin offering? The Tanya, because it says in the Brisa, Kol asher yigabiv sarah, anything that touches the flesh of the Chatas, Yikdash will become holy like the Chatas. Leos Kamoa. Shem Psula, that if this Chatas was disqualified, he himself, then the meat that it touches or the utensil it touches will also become disqualified. Vim Kshera. And if whatever the Chatas touches, if the Chatas was Kshera, then Tochal Kechomer Shabbat, then you could eat it like a Chatas, but only according to the stringent laws of how a Chatas can be eaten. And so we're saying, Rav Ashi is saying that this is another case of heter mitzdaref for Easter. The Rabbanan would say tzricha. No, the Rabbanan would say that why do they not learn from Chatas the law of heter mitzdaref for Easter? So because according to them, Tam Ki'ikar is learned out from Mishras. And so therefore, the Rabbanan, what would they do with the fact that Chata seems to be saying heter mitzdaref for Easter? And so therefore, they should learn from there to the rest of Shas. The Rabbanan, so the Rabbanan say, you need the two psukim, or both of them are teaching us this principle of actually Tam Ki'ikar, and they're not teaching us this principle of heter mitzdaref for Easter. Because of Rahman Gabe Chatas, because if we only learned the principle of Tam Ki'ikar by a Chatas, Amina, I would have said Nazir, well, Asa Mina, that you can't. I would have said you can't learn it out. The law of Tam Ki'ikar from a Nazir, Mishum the Nazir Mikachim, that Nazir can't learn it out from Chatas, because the Nazir Mikachim Yafinan. Kachim is more severe, Chatas is more severe, so you're not going to learn out Nazir from Kachim. Because of Rahman and Gabi Nazir, and if the Torah had said this halacha of Tam Ki'ikar just by Nazir, Avamina, Nazir lo yafin, and I would have said you can't learn out the law of the Chatas from the Nazir. Why? Mishum the Chamir Isurai, because the Nazir is more strict. Afilu Chartzin, because even though the Chartzin, we said it to the spirit of the Chartzin, the skin or the seeds, well, let's just translate here as the seeds, the Afilu Chartzin Asurai, even the seeds which are not edible by the grapes are going to be prohibited. So therefore, it's a stringent, so you wouldn't be able to learn out Chatas from the Nazir. So therefore, you can't learn out Tam Ki'ikar from Chatas to Nazir or Nazir to Chatas. So therefore, you need it in both places. So therefore, you can learn out from there to the whole Shas. Rabbi Akiva Amarcha, and Rabbi Akiva who says that Nazir and Chatas are two psukim that come together, and so therefore it's limited to those two cases, heter mitzdaref for Easter. So if that's the case, why do we need the two verses? Why do we need these two verses? It would make sense if the Torah just wrote it by the Chatas or Gomer Nazir Minei, because he would say you don't learn out the Nazir from the Chatas. Why? The Chuan Mikachim will Gamrinan, because you can't learn out Chuan from Kachim. And so therefore you need to write it by both the Chatas and also by the Nazir. But the Torah could have just written it by Nazir, Chatas Minei. And then the Chatas would have been derived from the Nazir. Because Rabbi Kiva says all the prohibitions from the Torah are derived from the Nazir. We learn out so many halachos from a Nazir, like we learn out to have bittul b'shishim from a Nazir. And so what about the fact that the Rabbanan say, no, you needed to say it by Chatas because Nazir is the stringency that the Chartzon is also prohibited. So Rabbi Akiva must be of the position, says the Rosh, that this prohibition of Chartzon by Nazir is not considered a Chumrah. So it wouldn't be enough of a Chumrah vis-a-vis the Chatas. And just like we don't say, just like the Nazir is prohibited in a haircut, because this is not considered like a Chumrah because that vis-a-vis the Chatas. So Rabbanan Amrilacha, and the Rabbanan would say, even though we hold like Rabbi Akiva, that we could have learned out the Chatas from the Nazir, and so therefore become Shnei Ksuvim Abban Ka'echad. So the Rabbanan would say, no, it's still not a case of Shnei Ksuvim Abban Ka'echad, because it needs to be written by the Chatas as well, because Chatas laheter mitzdarf le'iser v'chuan mikachim lo gamrinan, because the verse that says by Chatas is coming to teach us heter mitzdarf le'iser, and we can't learn out chuan mikachim lo gamrinan. So the Rabbanan would say, even if we hold like Rabbi Akiva, that we're able to learn out Chatas from Nazir, and you could say that it's still not Shnei Ksuvim Abam Ke'echad, because Chatas comes to teach us Heter Mitzdarf Iser. We wouldn't learn out from there Chuan Mikachim Lo Gamrinan, because can't learn out Chuan from Kachim. Umishras Litim Tam Ke'ikar Mikanat Adam Kol Yisur and Shabbatorah. And from the word Mishras, which says by the Nazir, that's to teach us this principle of Tam Ke'ikar by a Nazir. And from there you could have learned it out for the whole Torah. Rabbi Akiva, who says that you can't learn from Nazir to the whole Torah, he says Travayu Heter Mitzdarf Iser. He said both the case of the Nazir and the Chatas are to teach us this principle of Heter is combining with the Iser, and therefore we would have Shnei Ksuvim Pan Ke'echad, call Shnei Ksuvim Pan Ke'echad Eimel Amdim. Anytime you have two verses that come together, you can't learn out anything from them. Okay, we'll stop here in the middle of this beautiful sugya. We're not finished with it, but we'll pick it up, God willing, later today and tonight and tomorrow. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to.